Infinite banking is a grassroots movement. We're building it from the ground up. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. We are digging up buried talents with the infinite banking concept as conceived and described in R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Today's subject is going to be IBC from the ground up. Nash spoke about how top-down thinking was not going to be the appropriate approach for sharing and implementing and applying the infinite banking concept. What I believe is that it's natural for us to share good things with those that we love and care about. When it come across a good thing, we naturally want to share that, whether that's a good book or a store with items on sale, whatever the case may be. We want to be able to share good news with folks. It's interesting that I just said good news right there. You know, what I believe and what I've been thinking about just right now, actually, even, is just like how Jesus Christ didn't do so much of his work of implementing his ministry in the synagogue. And I'm not trying to get too theological here. Just follow with me the approach. He recruited 12 individuals to his cause, not all of whom continued, also worth noting there. But he went right to individuals, right to folks in the work of fishing, for example. Went to two brothers, fishermen, that were on the job with their dad that day. And he said, that's fine. You know, I'll make you fishers of men, is what he said, which is just terribly interesting in and of itself. But there was a direct person-to-person approach. So Nash didn't see results in trying to go to the tops of the industries of formal education. No results in going to the top of the insurance industry as a whole, or other fields, other industries. What he laid out was a grassroots movement. Him going through some dire experiences in his life, loss of family members, home being burglarized, getting stuck with a vast amount of debt, over $500,000 of debt at 23% interest in a real estate deal gone terribly awry, out of his control, and him realizing that there's some tools at his access that he already had that he could use to address that problem. And then as he began to teach his clients about what he'd learned, this arrival of understanding the infinite banking concept and how he implemented it in his life, he in fact tripled his personal income, he says in his Becoming Your Own Banker book, by teaching others what it was that he was doing. So as a grassroots movement from the ground, the lay person, you know, and he would talk about how with third grade math, we could understand all that we needed to, you know, no fancy illustrations, no magical numbers, but with third grade math, reason, logic, from the ground up, this idea could be shared and scaled for the lay person. So I want to address everyone, because I know that some may be vetting this idea still for the first time. You don't have a policy yet. You don't have a system in place. You're learning. You're on your learning journey about infinite banking and whole life and everything involved in what we share here on the channel and what Nelson wrote about in his book. Remember these things with logic, reason. See, I'm starting with those, and I believe Nash did, because there's no belief that has to be given here unmerited. But rather, we could just look at the facts of the characteristics of dividend-paying whole life insurance to know that it can satisfy our need for a death benefit, our need for finance, private ownership, control, no exposure to market volatility, a hedge against inflation, creditors, and so many other different characteristics. We can just reasonably and logically look at the facts of life insurance to arrive at those things. But he does continue. Imagination. It's using a private entity that you own and control. That's a life insurance policy. It gives you a death benefit, but you can use it for satisfying your need of finance. Now that's out of the box thinking. So it takes imagination. And then prophecy, something else that he mentions. Now when he says prophecy, I think of history. I think that we have lessons from the past, and that if we are aware of them, make ourselves aware of them, learn from them, the future, what we could prophesy into the future. And I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But looking at the past, I feel can be something of an indication and give us some clues looking ahead. You know, as Jim Rohn talked about, you know, if the sun comes up and it goes down, and it comes up and it goes down, and, you know, there are seasons in life, that's a good indication of what things may look like in the future. Yes, some summers are going to be more dry. Some winters are going to be more wet, whatever the case may be. But there are some indicators there if we're willing to look at them and consider moving forward what to do. Again, Nash gave these principles of if we would think long range, if we would not hesitate or be afraid to capitalize, if we would not do business with banks, and if we would instead be an honest banker ourselves and rethink our thinking, then those are the philosophies. They're not the tools. The tools would be whole life insurance policies, the book itself, but the thinking, I can't make you think long range. But if you have the desire to think 3 generations out, 4 generations out, 5, 6, 7, 8 generations out like I do, that will benefit you greatly. If you will stave off any hesitation to capitalize, but realize that much like Nash did when he was stuck with $500,000 in debt, that what he actually needed to do was not pay that debt off right away at 23% interest, but rather fund dramatically higher premiums into policies that he owned and controlled, wherein he had guaranteed access to that capital at a known interest environment that wasn't going to change from 9 to 23% like it happened in his real estate deals that went wrong. He can access the capital in a known interest environment. Then he could pay off that debt. And 2 birds with 1 stone. I mean, beautiful scenario. He's funding, building, and appreciating asset to pay off a bad liability. So incredible thinking right there. But not being afraid to capitalize his own system. Not doing business with banks anymore. We don't own that. We don't control that. Those dividends that the banks and those commercial banks do make dividends, receive dividends. The owners, not us. So not doing business with banks. We don't set those terms and conditions. So not doing business with banks. Playing honest banker with our capital, recognizing that our capital has a cost of money and that interest is always paid. Either we're paying somebody else interest or we're forfeiting the interest that we otherwise could have earned. So we don't steal the peas. We play honest banker, and then we continually rethink our thinking. We're open to growth. Now, I can't make you do any of those things. You can't make me do any of those things. But when we arrive at recognizing the value of those things, thinking long range, not being afraid to capitalize, not doing business with banks, being an honest banker with ourselves, and rethinking our thinking, when we recognize the value of those philosophies, those principles, we will be the ones who benefit. Now, to those who have a policy, and those that have already started on the path of becoming your own banker, whether you're in your first week or your first year, or whether you have 10 policies, whatever the case may be, I would give a word of encouragement and recognize them. Because again, what I believe is that when we know about something good, we want to share it. Just remember this. Nash said that more is going to be caught than taught. So when you either are wanting to go to your neighbors and family members and your parents and your church members and folks that are in the same organizations that you are and those within your circle, and you're wanting to tell them about this infinite banking concept, just understand that we, for our own sake, yes, it's good to sow that seed, but recognize that some will land on rock. Some will be eaten by the birds. Some the sun will shrivel up. Some will take to fertile ground and it'll make 30, 60, 100%. So what I'm saying is that more is caught than taught. We can share the information. We can sow the seed. But a lot of sayings are coming to my mind right now, like you can't push a dead bear up a tree. Something I've heard a friend say more than once. You can't push a dead bear up a tree. The Bible says a dog will return to his vomit. Don't cast your pearls before swine. There are many clues that we have out here. Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. Okay, there are just so many things that are out of our control. And I know that I've personally experienced this. No doubt Nash did. No doubt he felt frustration being a licensed professional in an industry, an admirable industry in general, when done right, an admirable industry. And perhaps not getting the traction that he would have liked from top down. But again, that's what he arrived at, I believe, is that this is from the ground up work. This is a grassroots movement where it's about you becoming your own banker. If the CEOs and the presidents and the heads of committee and these people of position, and I'm not trying to knock on position, but I also recognize that the highest and the lowest of us have a certain amount of pride and ego, and sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. Maybe we're just not in a season of life. I could confess that there have been times in my life when I would not have been very open to various ideas, whether that was personal growth and development or financial advice or marital advice. It makes me think of Dave Ramsey, and I think he hits the nail on the head when he says that, for example, parents aren't interested in their children's views and thoughts and opinions on intimacy or personal finance. So that's just a nature that we all have to address, the nature of pride or ego. And yet, let's marry that with the recognition of we're casting seed. So again, I'm trying to encourage you along your way, not blindly. Again, this idea of becoming your banker is based in logic, reason. Yes, it's in imagination as well, but it's logical and reasonable that you could become your own banker, regardless of whether anybody else does or not. I know that what I and my wife have chosen to implement and put into place should set up our children, our two sons and our daughter, in a much different foundation. We're building on rock. We're not building on sand. Our desire is that our children and future generations are never beholden to a commercial bank for their need for finance at someone else's terms, someone else's conditions, paying interest to someone else, having money forever leave and bleed out of the family or out of a business or out of investments that they make, but rather that they maintain control and that they do it well. And of course, again, more is caught than taught. They need to see that in my wife and I, that we pay significant premiums, that we don't steal the peas, that we use our capital well, and everything else that's embodied in Becoming Your Own Banker and in R. Nelson Nash's book, Building Your Warehouse of Wealth, his second book. So let me say that with my own experience, from the very first time that I picked up R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and even after I had my first, maybe even my second policy, I had what were for me, big revelations. I had some continuing evolution in my understanding of the infinite banking concept. And I think that would be the case for everyone. But from the very beginning, I was enthusiastic about the idea that I could become my own banker and told friends, family members, neighbors. I mean, just as a consumer myself, before I was a professional, I just told people about what I was doing because I was excited about it. We were paying off student loan debt. We were financing vacations. We were just doing lots of life things. We were providing for our need for finance with policies that we owned and controlled, learning about the idea, but doing so for what it was that we wanted to do at that time and looking into the future. So as a consumer, we were actively telling folks, and then naturally ended up answering questions. And I just I went down the rabbit hole, and I've stayed in it, I suppose, because I read and reread Nash's works. And obviously I've got to the point now to where I'm a professional and I coach and I mentor and I teach folks that yes, you can become your own banker. And along the way, transitioning from a consumer to a professional, I found that the truth is the truth. That a prophet's not without honor in his own country. You know, as a consumer, I shared the information. Some used it, some didn't. As a professional, I share the information. Some use it, some don't. And that's fine. Everyone should be able to make their own choice. Again, I would suggest that we use our imagination, think out of the box, logically, reasonably, and arrive at answering this: who controls the banking function as it relates to your life? And if you can do that and pursue answering that question imaginatively, reasonably, logically, I believe you'll find the answers. So this has been an absolute pleasure for me. If you'd like to have a conversation about how you could implement the infinite banking concept into your household, your business, your investing, you can reach me at 828-817-4223, or you can email durhamtalents@gmail.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. I look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day. Take care.